Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Delighted that you have stopped by. This is all about wine. If you're interested in a certain topic, you can find out more about it. And it's really specifically designed for those of you studying the fine print, the fine details of the world of wine, like this presentation here, aimed at those of you going into the Diploma, the Level 4. And we're looking at Germany here, Deutschland. So we are looking at a 7-parter. This video on Riesling as a key grape variety, and the next video, Spätburgunder or Pinot Noir as a key grape variety, are available as free content on the world of YouTube and beyond. All the other videos, though, are only available on my e-learning portal. That's over at winewithjimmy.com. You'll find it at the bottom of the slide just there. Lots of wonderful extra goodies to help you with your studies. That rhymed in a way, didn't it? So let's get cracking into the grape varieties in play in Germany, and then we'll look into specifically, of course, Riesling. I've got some fairly up-to-date figures here. This is the 2020 statistics for Germany. Now, because of the cool climate, Germany, rightly so, has actually been a country traditionally focused on white wine and grape varieties which can naturally tolerate the conditions, like Riesling, for example. But also those that have been bred for the purpose of being in this kind of climate, the likes of Müller-Thurgau and Kerner, for example. Now, go back 4 decades, go back to 1980, 89% of the white grapes were white. Sorry, 89% of the grapes were white. However, since then, red wine production is on a surge and it's doing exceptionally well in this country. In 2020, a third of the plantations, as you'll see here from this chart, a third were black varieties, actually just under 32.8%, as you can see. Since the 1990s, levels of Grauburgunder, Weißburgunder, and to a lesser extent Chardonnay have also risen considerably. And there are small plantings of the others, the things like Merlot, Cabernet, Sauvignon. Now, grape varieties need not be featured on a label, but they typically are. So the way that we're going to be showing you the grape varieties, if this one is all about Riesling, and then the next one will be about Spätburgunder, which is, these are the queen and the king, respectively, of Germany. And there will be another video that goes through the other grape varieties, actually, most of them from this list. So it's quite an interesting one to go through. Okay, so let's begin to look at the world of Riesling. Now, by 58 BC, the Romans had invaded and established Alsace and also around that area, around the Rhine, as a center of viticulture. Now, to protect this highly valued industry, the Romans built a significant amount of fortifications and military camps that evolved into various communities, which had been inhabited continuously to the present day. While part of the Roman Empire, Alsace was a part of Germania Superior, and the oldest archaeological finds that may indicate early German viticulture are what you see on the picture on the right-hand side. This is curved pruning knives found in the vicinity of Roman garrisons, dating from around the 1st century AD. So I'm just setting the scene here for the Rhine Valley in terms of the emergence of viticulture. Now, Trier, which is in the Mosel, the southern part of the Mosel, is considered Germany's oldest city. It was a Roman garrison, and it was situated and is situated on the banks of the Mosel. In reference to the vineyards along the Mosel can be found the work of a Roman poet, Ausonius, of course, quite famous for Chateau Ozone in Bordeaux. But this poet wrote Mosella around 370 AD, describing the steep vineyards of the Mosel. I'm not going to do it in Latin, but it translates to, and the hills green with the grapes of Bacchus, and the lovely waters of the Mosel flowing silently beneath, is what he wrote about this area. Now, we talked about this a little bit already. The earliest mention of Riesling actually dates back to March the 13th in 1435. Some people say February, but March the 13th is now the date set by Wines of Germany as the birthday of Riesling. And the mention was by Klaus Kleinfisch, who was the cellar master at Schloss Katzelbogen in Rosselsheim near Frankfurt, and that's in the state of Hessen. And it's reports on the expenditures and revenues of Graf Johann IV von Katzelbogen. And it basically stated that it was 22 gold coins for Rieslingen vine cuttings for the vineyard. So really old mention of this variety. Next up is our mention of the first ever Kabinett Riesling, and this dates back to 1573. Schloss Vollratz make a Vollratz wine where they have this date at the top right of the label here, 1573, to depict this this very famous time, indeed, for making one of these first sort of Pradiketzwein style wines. And the naming of Riesling. So the name could derive from Riesen, which is Old German is Risan, R-I-Z-A-N, and that in today's terms is Riesen, R-E-I-S-S-E-N, which originally means to split, or then it sort of means to make an incision, then to carve, to engrave, later to tear or to write. Perhaps the earliest meaning of to split could be the ways that the berries would split between the fingers, similar to the use of the synonym fondant for chasselas, for example. Alternatively, the name might possibly be related to the grape's tendency to Millerondange, in German, that is Verissen, which it's thought it's stretching out a little bit too much. A little bit far-fetched. It's the second theory as it goes, but we think to split is quite likely. What about Riesling in the vineyard? And then we'll go into the winery. So Riesling has proven mightily successful in the climate of Germany, which is broadly cold and continental, because it can survive quite harsh conditions in winter. Riesling is a vine that has a lot of solid wood, can store a lot of carbohydrates, which can mean it's better protected in those cold winter months. So as the thermometer drops, other varieties would struggle and probably perish, but Riesling survives and it gets through those wintry conditions. So very good with bitter winter conditions. There you are as well to back that up. So very cold hardy with that hardwood. Look at that nice thick cordon that you see on that Riesling vine. Also, it is a late budding variety, which is an absolute game changer in the growing season, to kick off the growing season. Because, of course, cold continental climates often mean real large problems with spring frost. And if you're a late budder, you're going to miss that time and therefore successfully bud in the warmer conditions. So very, very well suited. But one probably downer, it's not necessarily, certainly not with climate change today, is that it is late ripening. So it's a late budder, late ripener. Some reports will tell you it's kind of mid to late ripening. It therefore needs good sun exposure, dry autumns, and in cooler years and cooler sites, it might not ripen fully. Because of this, plantings fell in the 1960s to the 1980s, really because Germany, of course, was socio-economically going through difficult times after the problems of most of the first half of the 20th century. Most recently would be the Second World War. So, of course, grape growers turn their attentions to more reliable, more consistent, easy to grow varieties, such as the crosses, like Müller-Thurgau. And that would achieve those must weights that they needed to get by law. However, improved vineyard management and techniques, rising temperatures due to global warming, means that there's a greater consistency of ripening, and plantings have recovered and are, of course, continuing to grow. We've only got to go back to this. You'll see here. So the numbers in 1970, about 23%, dropping to under 20% in the 80s. But then from then on, up to 20%, and now up to about 23, 24% of the production. So it is getting better. Now, it's very site-specific Riesling. It's found on a variety of soils, not just slate, but also limestone and clay. Possibly the most famous on slate. It's very typical. But you do get wonderful expressions across the board because of the microclimatic differences that one finds Riesling in. Another thing which is important is that in Germany, there is actually good clonal diversity of the Riesling grape variety, as one would expect. Here you've got a few examples of clone numbers, Neustadt and Geisenheim numbers, but there are many others. So we actually have a broad diversity, which means we have different raw materials to play with Riesling in Germany, then plus the site, the exposure, the drainage, the aspect, all those things. You, of course, can get quite a diversity in terroir behind Riesling, which is quite exciting, of course. What is the resultant style? So Riesling produces high quality wines in a range of styles from, of course, dry to sweet and everything in between. It retains its high acidity, characteristically high acidity, even when fully ripe, providing balance in sweet wines and giving the significant potential for aging. But in dry wines, provides beautiful freshness, which is wonderful. Now, in the right conditions, it can produce high natural levels of sugar, and it is susceptible to botrytis, making it, of course, ideal for the production of sweet wine. Riesling is really capable of making wines with pronounced intensity, great aromatic complexity, and depending on the ripeness, fruit flavors range from green and citrus all the way to tropical. It can have a bit of everything. As you'll see in this picture, you've got lemon, apple, okay, citrus, you've got green fruit, you've got some peach, you've got some mango, some guava. So it can have a bit of everything. Typically, the real ripe sites for dry wines could have tropical and certainly sweet wines. And then, of course, the lower Pradeketzwein and cooler vintage, cooler sites typically are citric and green in style. Look out for floral aromas too. Certainly in younger styles, white flowers, jasmine, honeysuckle. And with age, of course, Riesling can age, has the possibility of aging, certainly even with dry examples and all the way to sweet styles, developing toast, honeyed, and of course the much debated Petrol-like aromas. And we've got to discuss it, right? It's important to talk about this. So the famous petrol and kerosene smell in mature Riesling is known as the compound TDN. And that's what I put in brackets afterwards. You're not going to get me trying to actually talk about that out loud. Now, it relates actually to the sun exposure in the grape skin. So most people are under the impression that as a Riesling ages, it gains more of these compounds and it makes it more petroly. Okay, so yes, that is a case. We do tend to find it in older examples, but that doesn't actually give you the reasoning why younger Rieslings from places like Australia has compounds or can have compounds that are kind of like petrol-y or kerosene. So TDN is due to sun exposure. So it belongs to a group of compounds called the C13 norisprenoids. Yes, you heard it here first. And it's formed from precursors in the grapes that develop high levels of sunlight. So in sunlight, they develop high levels of these precursors. So that is an aroma that you won't get from the grape, but it's a precursor based there. And also some water stress too. So Australian Rieslings, though they are very conscious about this in Australia, you do find them having higher amounts of TDN. So typically, levels in European Rieslings would be somewhere around 1 to 50 micrograms per litre. But in Australian Rieslings, it can have levels as high as 250 micrograms per litre, and sometimes even higher. So please remember that these compounds are really to do with sun exposure of the vineyard if there's prolonged amounts. Now, if you are growing grapes and you are conscious about this and you actually are trying to move away from petrol or kerosene, some people believe it's a fault of viticulture, then of course concepts such as shading, protection of the grapes would be one way of protecting against overexposure in the sunlight. So that is something that is being looked into, certainly by Australians. Okay, that brings me to the end of the key grape variety of Riesling for Germany. So please do join me for another video. We have one on the key black grape variety, so Spätburgunder, otherwise known, of course, in most circles as Pinot Noir. If you do have any comments and questions or concerns, it would be lovely to hear from you. Please comment on this video below. Make sure you click like and you click subscribe. We really want to see those fingers. And of course, if you do find yourself in the UK, come and say hello and come to one of my establishments for a glass, or a bottle. Thank you very much. Ciao for now. Goodbye.